Isabel's winds and rain pushed more than 200 trees down here in Bird Park, but that's just a tiny fraction of the damage from that storm. CBS 6's video vault footage shows Jordan's Point Marina in Prince George County. More than 40 boats there damaged. The storm basically pushing them on top of each other. And even then, Prince George County residents told CBS 6 reporters they knew the storm would be unforgettable. And as we look back 20 years later, we can see they were right. To date, Isabel is still one of the most damaging and costly storms to ever hit Virginia. We'll hear stories from some of the first responders who were out on the front lines as Isabel charged through central Virginia. That coming up in just a few minutes. But first, let's check in with Chief Meteorologist Zach Daniel with a first look at our forecast. And Zach, as we've said, a gorgeous day here in the park. It's hard to imagine what was happening 20 years ago.
Yeah, people were picking up as the hurricane had moved through just a couple days prior, and it was an absolute mess. I want to show you what we have through our tower cam right now. It's a beautiful day today. It's been a while since we've had a system come directly through the area, and certainly nothing like Isabel. It's sort of the benchmark for high wind events that we've seen over the past several decades. Let me show you the track of Isabel. It was a long track. It became a named storm on the 6th of September in 2003. It became a Category 5 hurricane, and it made landfall on the 18th. We'll take you in tighter now and show you the track as it moved up through North Carolina and into Virginia. It was a Category 1 hurricane in southern Virginia. And Richmond was on the right side of that track, and with the forward speed and the rotation around the eye, we were on the most intense part of the storm. That is why we had such a widespread wind event. It was very much a wind-driven storm rather than the heavy rain event like Gaston that time. This was the wind bar that was set by landfalling hurricanes and tropical storms for us here in central Virginia. Let me show you what we've got outside right now. Just a few high clouds around. And overall, it's pretty nice though. Down to our south though, we have another system developing. It's potential tropical cyclone 16. This should become Ophelia tomorrow, and it will move into North Carolina, and the track right now is going to take it up through Virginia. That will bring us some rain and some wind. We'll check out the temperatures here across the area. Right now, very pleasant, and it should be a nice evening as well. Straight ahead, I'm going to cover the impact that Ophelia will have to central Virginia. That's coming up.
All right, thank you, Zach. As Hurricane Isabel approached Virginia, most people faced essentially two choices: run or hide. First responders did the opposite, as they always do. We recently caught up with two men who were instrumental in preparing central Virginia for the storm and then in responding once the flood of emergency calls started to come in. Our John Burkett has the story.
There are trees falling over onto homes. This happened on Franklin Street.
From the city to the surrounding counties.
We heard a metallic noise, and that was our minivan being smashed.
No part of Metro Richmond was spared the wrath of Hurricane Isabel. I'm standing in the middle of their living room on top of a tree. And while most hunkered down inside homes and shelters, others braved the elements to help those in need.
We have a lot of neighborhood streets that got trees that are blocking the roads. It's busy, and it's just going to get worse.
Thanks again for the good work that you guys are doing.
Well,
out there.
we're out there working hard just like y'all, and we're in for the long haul. Storm-wise, I mean, that was the biggest event in my tenure.
Battalion Chief Doug Reynolds appeared frequently on CBS 6 during our coverage of the hurricane.
It was a case where everybody was all hands on deck.
A calming presence during a turbulent time.
It was huge. I mean, when you consider that pretty much everybody in Henrico lost power.
But behind the scenes,
we were stretched like a rubber band. On a normal day back then, we used to run like 100, 125 calls. That day, we ran close to 600 calls.
At the height of the storm, the decision was made to pull all Henrico crews off the roads for their own safety. But when the calls of trees down on homes and cars continued to come in, exceptions were made.
You hated to send the men and women out. It was so dangerous, but you just couldn't not do it.
I was working in the Emergency Operations Center at the time.
Paul Marger was the fire chief in Chesterfield County when Isabel struck.
I remember long lines of trying to get gasoline. I remember debris piles. It was a mess.
In the midst of a long shift, he received a phone call.
My family called and said that a tree had come through the roof of the house.
A normal trip home from the office usually took Marger about 20 minutes. This time it took nearly an hour and a half.
When I got there, I had 17 trees down in my yard. no power.
But once he got his family to safety, it was right back to work.
You know, people wonder sometimes, why do you have to go in now? I'm like, that's what we're here for.
For these veteran first responders, the memories of Isabel remain fresh.
We lost water for the county for about 2 to 3 days. You didn't have fresh drinking water.
And Reynolds says it's important for everyone to remember how devastating it was.
I think you just kind of forget how bad these storms can be.
Though he's confident when the next one hits, local emergency workers will be ready, just like they were 20 years ago.
Incredible teamwork, and it was really cool to watch how it all came together and how great a job it all became.
That was our John Burkett reporting. And crews from CBS 6 were on the front lines back then as well. Reporters and photographers from WTVR braving the elements themselves to cover the storm, now telling their own stories, why they were out there. One former photographer puts it simply, that's what we do. Our Greg McQuaid shares their voices. That's ahead here at 6.
Well, those of us who were in Richmond in September of 2003 will never forget the name Isabel. The hurricane did unprecedented damage to our area, knocking down tens of thousands of trees, snapping power poles, and leaving people without electricity for days, even weeks. Let's send it back out to Bill at Bird Park, one of the places hit hardest in Central Virginia. Bill?
No, that's right, Julie. As you said, when it came to tree damage caused by Isabel, this is one of the areas that could have been considered kind of a ground zero. But CBS 6 didn't just have crews covering the storm here in the Richmond area. Our Greg McQuaid reported live from Virginia Beach during the height of Isabel 20 years ago this week. Tonight, Greg and photographer Joe Valdez introduce us to some of our other CBS 6 colleagues who covered Mother Nature's wrath on the coastline.
That quiet before the storm is something I find really fascinating.
Virginia Beach, a sun-drenched destination for tourists and locals alike. But in September of 2003, an unwanted guest just over the horizon was making reservations to crash into the coast.
Oh, it's Hurricane Isabel.
Jimmy Cox, assistant chief engineer at WTVR, and a team of journalists and photographers, including this reporter, are assigned to cover the hurricane along the Atlantic.
You know, and you know the drill. They tell you when the forecast is coming this way, and we would pack up our stuff and go towards where we thought the storm was going to be.
This is Storm Team 6 continuing coverage of Tropical Storm Isabel, brought to you by...
As the storm intensifies, Jimmy relays our round-the-clock dispatches by satellite back to Richmond.
Honestly, when I'm doing that gig, I'm running on sheer adrenaline.
Virginia Beach and the Outer Banks sit in the storm's crosshairs.
I think we all remember Isabel quite well.
The wrath of howling winds gusting to more than 90 miles an hour leave a lasting imprint on CBS 6 photojournalist Stacy Sagram.
It's got a real rumble to it. It's impressive. It's scary. One wrong step, one step left or right, and you can get taken out real quick.
All these years later, Stacy still marvels at Isabel's relentlessness.
That surf is crazy. I don't remember that surf being quite that staggering. That was incredible.
I was geeked up, man. I was ready to rock.
John Burkett captures Isabel's arrival while working behind the camera.
In that surge, it would sweep you away quickly.
The Category 2 hurricane packs a punch of unpredictability.
And sure enough, I mean, all of a sudden I'm ankle deep in water, and the next thing you know, the water is up to my chest. And you're like, whoa, what just happened here, right? I mean, it was real then. By that time, I mean, it was legit.
Despite evacuation orders, our CBS 6 crews remain.
Well, you're in the element of the storm. You're just along for the ride and hold on for dear life.
First responders make a sobering request to those who stay behind. Write names, phone, and social security numbers on our arms.
If you guys want to be down here in the area covering this thing, we want to make sure that we can identify if something goes wrong. You knew they weren't playing.
There was a rush to doing it. but that didn't supersede the dangers that you sometimes face. And as you get a little bit older, you start to realize those dangers are real.
The CBS 6 team escapes the battering on the beach largely unscathed.
Look at that devastation. That's amazing. Wow. Dude, that was some storm.
From the coast, Isabel roars across Virginia, leaving a trail of destruction and darkness in her wake.
And I remember driving back in, and usually you can see the skyline, and there was no skyline. And I ended up being without power for a total of 10 days at my house.
People think it's kind of fun to ride out the storms, and I'm here to tell you it's nothing to play with.
I got a call during the storm that 2 trees had fallen on my house in Midlothian, and my kids were scared to death.
Hurricane Isabel, a monster storm for the ages.
I can't believe it's been 20 years.
For a team of journalists, an assignment hard to forget.
We're just honored to be here and be able to witness it and respect it, you know, pay homage to it, and try to get through the next one too, because there will be more.
For I Have a Story.
Yeah, I mean, Mother Nature's queen, isn't she?
I'm Greg McQuaid, CBS 6 News.
And it's so true. It's all hands on deck in those situations. And you've got the devastation possibly at your own place, but you're out there trying to do your job.
Yeah, you've got plans as a station. We plan days in advance, and everything goes nuts when it happens. You know, you just never know where you're going to end up. Let's check out what we've got outside right now. It is a much different setup for today, 20 years and a couple days later. But we do have another storm that is headed our way. I'm going to start you off, though, with a couple of bullet points from Isabel. And when it moved through here, it was a hurricane in far southern Virginia on the 18th. It resulted in more than 10,000 trees down across central Virginia and really in the Richmond area. It was responsible for 10 lives lost, and nearly 2 million people were without power. We have benchmarks for all these different types of storms. For the wind events, it is Isabel. For the flooding, it's Gaston. For the snow, it was the 96 hurricane, or 96 blizzard, excuse me. So you got these, and hopefully we don't see another one that will supersede Isabel.